No one remembered when the girl stopped sitting like everyone else. At first it was small, so small it slipped past even the sharpest eyes. A shift in her chair, a hesitation before lowering herself onto a wooden bench, a quiet wince that vanished before anyone could question it. In a town where routines were predictable and people prided themselves on knowing each other, discomfort like hers should have stood out. But it didn't. Because noticing something is wrong is one thing. Admitting it is another. It happened on a late afternoon thick with heat, the kind that made even the air feel tired. The schoolroom windows were open, but no breeze came through. The other children fidgeted, restless and loud, their laughter echoing off the walls. She didn't laugh. She stood beside her desk longer than she should have, fingers gripping the edge as if the wood itself could steady her. The teacher glanced up, briefly irritated. "Sit down," she said, tapping chalk against the board. The girl didn't move. A few students snickered. One boy whispered something cruel under his breath. The teacher turned fully this time, her voice sharper. "Did you not hear me?" Slowly, carefully, the girl lowered herself into the chair. The moment she made contact, her body stiffened. It wasn't dramatic. There was no cry, no scene, no disruption that demanded attention. Just a subtle tightening, a flicker of pain that crossed her face before she forced it away. The kind of expression people could pretend they didn't see. So they did. Class continued. Chalk scraped. Pages turned. The world moved forward as if nothing had happened. But the girl didn't. By the time the final bell rang, most of the children rushed out in a blur of noise and relief. She stayed behind, pretending to organize her things, waiting for the room to empty. She always waited, because standing up was almost as hard as sitting down. When she finally did, she moved slowly, her breath shallow, her movements careful, too careful for a child her age. She kept her head down as she walked, as if avoiding eye contact could make her invisible. It almost worked. Almost. "Hey." The voice came from behind her, casual, uninterested. A classmate, lingering near the door. "You walk weird." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They landed anyway. She didn't respond, didn't turn, just kept moving. Outside, the town carried on in its usual rhythm. Shopkeepers leaned in doorways. Neighbors exchanged greetings. Life unfolded in small, familiar patterns that felt safe because they never changed. And in places like that, people learn something early. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. The girl passed by them all, unnoticed in the way that mattered most. A few eyes followed her, curious maybe, but curiosity is cheap. It doesn't require action. She reached the far end of the street, where the noise thinned and the spaces between houses grew wider. There, near a weathered fence, she finally stopped. She thought she was alone. That's why she whispered it. "It hurts when I sit." The words were barely sound at all, more breath than voice, fragile and uncertain, as if even speaking them aloud might make things worse. But someone heard. Not clearly, not completely, just enough. Across the road, a man paused mid-step. He hadn't been watching her, not really. Not the way someone watches when they're looking for something wrong. But there was something about the way she stood there, so still, so small against the fading light, that caught his attention. And then, those words, faint, almost lost to the hum of the afternoon. "It hurts." He frowned, instinctively turning his head, trying to catch the rest, but the moment passed. The girl had already moved again, slipping away before the silence could be broken. He stood there for a second longer than necessary. Then he shook it off. People said things all the time. Kids complained. It wasn't his business. Across the street, a woman closed her shop door, having noticed nothing at all. A pair of men laughed loudly about something trivial. Life continued, steady and uninterrupted. The town didn't stop. It never did. And the girl? She kept walking. Careful, quiet, invisible, carrying something no one wanted to see. Behind her, the man finally moved on too, but slower now. A faint crease in his brow, as if something unsettled had brushed past him without fully revealing itself. He could ignore it. Everyone else did. In a place like this, silence wasn't unusual. It was expected. The girl disappeared around the corner, her small figure swallowed by distance and indifference. And just like that, the moment was gone. Unnoticed, unchallenged, unspoken. All except for one thing. A whisper that refused, quietly, stubbornly, to be forgotten. In a town where nothing was supposed to go wrong, the easiest solution to discomfort was denial. By morning, the girl had already learned the rhythm again, how to move without drawing attention, how to sit without showing pain, how to exist in a way that made others comfortable. That was the rule no one ever said out loud. If your suffering makes others uneasy, hide it. The school bell rang sharp and unforgiving. Children poured into the room in clumps of noise and chatter, dragging chairs, laughing too loudly, complaining about heat and homework. Life loud and careless. She slipped in quietly, as she always did. Same desk, same chair, same invisible battle. This time, she didn't hesitate as long. That alone should have told someone something, that she was learning to endure it faster. That pain, repeated enough, becomes routine. But routines don't raise alarms. They bury them. Sit properly. The teacher's voice cut through the room before the girl had even settled. It wasn't cruel, just impatient. The kind of tone adults used when they believed they were correcting behavior, not missing a cry for help. "I am," the girl murmured. Too soft, too small. The teacher didn't hear, or chose not to. "You're slouching again," she said, turning back to the board. "If you can play all day, you can sit straight for an hour." A few students snickered. The girl adjusted, forcing her back upright, even as the pressure made her fingers curl tightly around the edge of the desk. Her knuckles whitened, her breath hitched once before she swallowed it down. No one noticed, or rather, no one reacted. Because noticing without reacting is how silence survives. At home, it wasn't much different. The house was small, but orderly, filled with the kind of discipline that left little room for complaint. Her guardian, an aunt who believed in toughness more than tenderness, watched her from across the room as she stood, instead of sitting on the floor mat for dinner. "Why are you standing like that?" she asked. The girl hesitated. There it was again, that moment, the thin, fragile space where truth could step forward. She began, her voice catching. "It hurts when I—" Her aunt sighed, already turning away. "You children always have something," she muttered. "Yesterday it was your stomach, today it's your back. Sit down and eat before the food gets cold." The words weren't harsh. That's what made them worse. They were ordinary. Dismissal wrapped in routine. The girl lowered herself slowly, biting the inside of her cheek as pain flared sharp and immediate. Her body stiffened, but she kept her face still. She had learned that much. Pain was allowed. Showing it wasn't. Outside, the town moved in its quiet agreement. A neighbor had noticed the girl walking differently days ago. Slower, careful, like each step had to be measured. "She's probably just clumsy," the woman told herself, adjusting her scarf as she watched from behind a curtain. Another man had seen her avoid sitting on a low wall where children often gathered. Too delicate. Even the shopkeeper, who saw nearly everything that passed through the main road, had caught a glimpse of her wincing as she shifted her weight. He paused for a moment. Just a moment. Then someone called for change. A customer asked a question, and the thought dissolved before it could take shape. Because in this town, thoughts like that were inconvenient, and inconvenient thoughts were quickly replaced. Back at school, the pattern repeated. But pain, when ignored, doesn't disappear. It deepens. By midday, the girl could barely concentrate. The words on the board blurred together, meaningless shapes swimming in front of her eyes. Every second stretched longer than it should have, each minute anchored by the weight of something she couldn't escape. She shifted in her seat. Once, twice, the chair creaked. "Stop moving," the teacher snapped, without turning around. "You're distracting everyone." A ripple of quiet laughter followed. The girl froze, not because she wasn't in pain, but because she had just learned something important. Movement brought attention. Attention brought judgment, so she stopped moving. Completely. By the end of the day, she didn't wait as long to leave. She couldn't. When the final bell rang, she stood too quickly, a sharp gasp escaping before she could catch it. This time, someone heard. A girl beside her glanced over, brows furrowing. "Are you okay?" It was a simple question. A doorway, the kind that only stays open for a second. The girl looked at her, eyes wide, hope flickering for just a moment. Then she saw it. Not concern, not really. Curiosity, the kind that fades as quickly as it comes. "I'm fine," she said quickly. Too quickly. The other girl shrugged. "Okay." And just like that, the moment closed. Because in a town built on silence, even kindness was shallow. It didn't dig, it didn't stay, it didn't ask twice. As the girl stepped outside again, the sun hung lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the road. Everything looked softer in that light, gentler, almost forgiving. But nothing had changed, not really. She walked the same path as yesterday, careful, measured, invisible, and behind all of it, something worse than pain had begun to settle in. The understanding that she could speak, and still not be heard. He almost didn't stop. That was the truth of it. The man had been crossing the street for something ordinary. Bread, maybe, or a repair he'd been putting off for weeks. Nothing important. Nothing that should have shifted the direction of his attention. But then he saw her again. Same girl, same careful walk, same unnatural stillness in her posture, as if her body was negotiating with pain instead of simply existing through it. Most people see children every day and think nothing of them. They blend into the background of noise and movement, like birds or passing wind. But something about her didn't blend. It resisted. She wasn't just quiet. She was controlled. Too controlled for someone her age. He slowed his steps without realizing it. Across the road, she paused at the edge of a step leading down from a small shop entrance. Just a single step. Nothing dangerous, nothing unusual. But she hesitated longer than necessary. Her hand tightened around her bag strap. Her breath changed. Barely noticeable, but real. Then she lowered herself carefully. Too carefully. Like the act itself carried consequences. When she landed, her shoulders tightened sharply. A microsecond of pain, gone before anyone else could name it. But he saw it. Not because he was looking for it, but because something about her made it impossible not to see once you had. He stopped walking entirely. The world continued around him. A vendor called out prices. A bicycle rattled past. A dog barked somewhere down the road. Life didn't pause for observation. But he did. Because now he remembered something else. Yesterday. A faint voice. A whisper that hadn't belonged to the noise of the street. "It hurts when I sit." At the time, he had dismissed it. People complain. Kids exaggerate. Life moves on. That was the normal conclusion. The safe one. But now, it didn't sit right. Because memory has a strange way of sharpening things when you don't want it to. He watched her disappear into the direction of the school gate. Then he followed. Not quickly, not obviously. Just enough distance to remain invisible, the way people in small towns learn to observe without being noticed. The school was nothing special. worn walls, cracked paint, a courtyard where children shouted and ran like nowhere in the world could ever harm them. Except not all harm announces itself loudly. Some of it grows quietly in corners. He stood near the outer fence, arms folded, pretending to wait for something else. And he watched. The girl entered the gate slowly. A teacher called something out. She nodded. Too quickly, like she was trying to avoid being questioned. Then she sat. And that was when his jaw tightened slightly. Because sitting should not look like negotiation. But for her, it did. Her body lowered with visible caution, as if the chair might not be safe, as if contact itself carried warning. Her face tightened for just a second, just long enough for him to understand what others refused to see. Pain. Real. Immediate. Not imagined. Not exaggerated. The bell rang again, loud and indifferent. Children filled the yard, chasing each other, arguing over nothing, laughing in ways that didn't carry weight. And she remained still. Too still. Like every movement had been rationed. A teacher walked past her desk. No pause, no second glance. Just routine. That was when something shifted inside him. Not anger yet, not action. Something quieter. Recognition. Because he had seen that kind of silence before. Not in children, but in places where people had learned not to speak up. He had seen it in adults who flinched when they thought no one was watching. He had seen it in homes where laughter felt forced. And he knew what silence usually meant. It didn't mean nothing was happening. It meant too many people had decided not to see it. The final bell came too soon. Students rushed out in waves. She stayed behind for a moment longer than the rest, as if waiting for the room itself to become safe again before leaving it. Then she stood. Slow. Precise. Every movement measured. He stepped back slightly, letting her pass without drawing attention. Up close, he noticed something else. The way she avoided pressure on one side of her body. Subtle, but consistent. And then, just as she reached the gate, she paused again. A small shift, a tightening of her breath. And in that moment, he almost said something. For a while, he just stood there. People passed him without noticing his stillness. The world didn't ask why he was thinking too hard. But something had changed. Because now he had a question that refused to leave. If she said it hurts, why did everyone act like it didn't? And worse, what happens when everyone agrees not to ask? He looked down the road where she had disappeared, the same road everyone else ignored, the same silence everyone accepted. But now it felt different. He had heard her. Not loudly, not clearly, but enough. And once you hear something like that, you don't get to pretend you didn't. The next time he saw her, he didn't tell himself it was nothing. That alone changed everything. Because most people in the town had already mastered the habit of unseeing. A flicker of discomfort? Ignore it. A strange detail? Rationalize it. A child who moved like pain followed her step? Call it imagination and move on. But the man didn't move on this time. He waited. Not in a dramatic way, not with urgency, just presence. The quiet kind of waiting that doesn't demand anything from the world, but refuses to leave it alone. He saw her leave school again in the late afternoon light. The same careful rhythm, the same guarded posture, the same quiet struggle hidden beneath ordinary movement. And this time, he didn't look away. He followed at a distance, not to trap her, not to confront her, but because something inside him had finally stopped treating her pain like background noise. She turned down a quieter street, where the houses grew older and the noise of the town thinned into silence. He slowed before he got too close, watching as she stopped near a low stone wall, gripping it slightly, as if she needed support. Then she did something small, something telling. She lowered herself onto the edge of the wall, then immediately shifted, wincing. It was quick, reflexive, but real. He stopped a few meters away, giving space between them. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between adult and child felt heavy, not with danger, but with uncertainty. Finally, he spoke. "Hey." Her body stiffened instantly. Not fear exactly, expectation. As if she had learned that voices approaching her always carried correction. She didn't turn. "Yes?" she asked quietly. "Are you all right?" A pause. Too long to be casual. Too practiced to be honest. "I'm fine," she said automatically. The answer came like it had been rehearsed too many times. He nodded slowly, though she couldn't see it. "You don't sound fine." That made her turn. Not fully, just enough to look at him from the corner of her eye. People in the town usually didn't question her answers. They accepted them quickly, relieved to return to their own lives. But this man didn't. That was new. She insisted again, softer this time. He didn't argue. Not yet. Instead, he stepped slightly to the side so he wasn't looming over her. Small detail, important difference. "I heard you say something yesterday," he said carefully. Her expression changed, just slightly, a tightening in her jaw, a warning signal in a child's body that had already learned too much about being dismissed. "I didn't say anything," she replied quickly. But he didn't retreat from the memory. "You said it hurts when I sit." Silence. Not empty silence. Heavy silence. The kind that fills a space too quickly to be natural. Her eyes dropped to the ground. "I don't know what you mean," she whispered. He realized then that she wasn't lying to him. She was protecting herself, because in a place like this, truth didn't always feel safe. Sometimes it felt like punishment. He softened his voice further. "I'm not here to get you in trouble." That made her finally look at him properly. For the first time, he saw her face without motion. Young, tired, guarded in a way no child should have to be. "I just noticed something," he continued, "and I wanted to make sure you're okay." A long pause followed, the kind where trust tries to decide whether it can exist. Then very quietly, she said, "It hurts." 2 words. No details. No explanation. Just truth, finally allowed to exist outside her body. His expression didn't change into shock or panic. He didn't rush to conclusions. He simply nodded, as if acknowledging something real. "Where?" he asked gently. Her hands tightened around the edge of the wall. She hesitated. Then, barely audible, "When I sit, and sometimes when I stand up." That was enough. More than enough. He didn't push for more. He didn't overwhelm her with questions. He had learned that urgency often shuts doors that patience can open. Instead, he said something simple. "Has anyone taken you to see someone about it?" She shook her head immediately. "No." A pause. Then softer. "They say I'm fine." That sentence stayed in the air longer than anything else, because it wasn't just a statement. It was a conclusion someone else had made about her body, without her agreement. He looked away for a moment, thinking, not reacting. This wasn't about guessing. It wasn't about assuming worst-case scenarios. It was about something more grounded. A child in pain, and a system of adults who had decided not to see it. He exhaled slowly. "Okay," he said finally. Not dismissive, not final, just steady. "I believe you." That was the moment everything shifted, not because it solved anything, but because it interrupted a pattern that had been running for too long. Her eyes flickered up again, uncertain. People didn't usually say that. They usually said, "You're exaggerating," or "It's nothing," or "You'll be fine." Belief was rare, and therefore dangerous in its own quiet way. He stepped back slightly, giving her space again. "I'm going to help you figure out what's causing it," he said. "Not today, but I won't ignore it." Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to protest. But no words came, because for the first time, someone wasn't telling her how to feel. He was simply refusing to abandon what she had said. As he walked away that evening, he understood something clearly. The town didn't fail people in loud ways. It failed them in quiet agreement. One person dismisses, another repeats it, a third chooses not to ask, and suddenly no one is responsible. But now he was. Not officially, not loudly, but personally. Because once you choose to listen in a place built on silence, you also choose to disrupt it. The first time he brought it up, people laughed. Not openly at first, not in a way that felt direct. It came in softer forms, raised eyebrows, half smiles, the kind of polite dismissal that small towns use when they want a conversation to end without confrontation. He had spoken to a local clinic worker, carefully, respectfully, just enough detail to be taken seriously, not enough to sound alarmist. "There's a child," he said, "who's been in pain for a while. She says it hurts when she sits, and no one seems to have looked into it properly." The worker leaned back in her chair, already deciding. "Oh," she said, like the answer was obvious. "Kids say things like that all the time. Growing pains. Maybe she fell. It's probably nothing serious." That word again. Nothing. He had learned something by now. Nothing was often a decision, not a fact. "I think she needs to be checked," he said calmly. A pause, then a polite but firm smile. If her family was concerned, they would have brought her in. That sentence was the town's real shield. Responsibility always belonged to someone else. So he went to the family. That was harder. The aunt listened with her arms crossed, expression tightening with every sentence. "You've been talking to my niece?" she asked sharply. "I've observed her," he corrected gently. "She's in pain. It's affecting how she moves. It should be checked." The aunt exhaled through her nose, offended more than worried. "She's dramatic," she said immediately. "Always has been. If she hurts, she would tell me properly." You didn't believe her. That landed differently. Not loudly, but deeply. For a moment, the aunt's face shifted. Something uncertain flickered there. But it didn't last. "You're making something out of nothing," she said, voice harder now. "She's a child. They exaggerate." And just like that, the door closed. Not because he was wrong, but because admitting he might be right would require action. And action is what most people avoid when comfort is at stake. By the time word spread through the neighborhood, the story had already changed shape. He had become the man interfering with a private family matter. The girl had become sensitive or delicate, and the problem itself, whatever it was, had shrunk again into something easier to ignore. But he didn't stop, because now he had seen her too clearly. He couldn't return her to invisibility. He went back to the clinic, then another, then a school administrator. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Initial interest, quick dismissal, subtle irritation at persistence. "We don't see any urgent issue. She seems fine at school. No one else has reported anything." And with every answer, the same unspoken message. If it mattered, someone else would have already acted. But no one had. That was the problem. Meanwhile, the girl continued to endure. She didn't understand everything happening outside her daily life, but she felt the shift in the air. Adults talking longer than usual. Whispers that stopped when she walked by. Something was changing. And change in a place built on routine always feels like danger before it feels like relief. At school, she was more careful than ever. She minimized movement, avoided sitting for too long, avoided standing too quickly. Her world had shrunk into a set of instructions her body learned on its own. Don't react. Don't show it. Don't become a problem. But pain has no respect for instruction. It grows anyway. The turning point came on a late afternoon, when he returned to the school again, this time not alone. He had spoken to someone higher up, someone who, after enough persistence, had finally agreed to take a look. They arrived together. The principal met them at the gate, smiling too widely. "There's really no need for concern," he said immediately. "We keep an eye on all our students." But they went in anyway. And they saw her. She was sitting at her desk, hands folded tightly, body rigid in a way that no child chooses without reason. When she shifted slightly, her face tightened. A pause, a flicker, then she forced stillness again. The official glanced once, then again, less dismissive now, more uncertain. The man didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He simply watched her reaction carefully, letting the moment speak for itself. Because truth, when finally observed directly, becomes harder to reshape. Later, they spoke with her again, this time with witnesses, this time with someone trained to listen differently. She spoke less than before. Fear had taught her that too much honesty could be risky. But even her silence carried weight now. When asked where it hurt, she pointed briefly, hesitated, then stopped as if unsure she was allowed to continue. But no one interrupted her. No one dismissed her. And that alone changed the atmosphere. The town did not respond quickly. It resisted. There were murmurs of overreaction, complaints about outsiders interfering, people who insisted things were fine because accepting otherwise would mean admitting they had ignored something important. But the evidence didn't disappear just because people disliked it. A child in pain cannot be explained away forever. And slowly, reluctantly, the town began to do something it had avoided for too long. The clinic room was too bright. That was the first thing she noticed. Not the people, not the voices, not even the strange smell of disinfectant that clung to everything. It was the light, clean, white, unavoidable, pressing into every corner, as if nothing inside it could stay hidden. She sat on the edge of the examination bed, legs still, hands folded tightly in her lap. For the first time in days, she didn't have to pretend to sit comfortably. She just had to sit. And yet, even here, her body remembered caution. The man stood near the door, not too close, not too far. He wasn't speaking. He had learned by now that silence could either harm or help. It depended on who used it. The doctor asked gentle questions. "When does it hurt the most?" She hesitated. A glance toward the man, then back down. "When I sit and when I stand up." Her voice was small, but steady enough to be heard clearly this time. The doctor nodded once, writing something down. No dismissal, no sigh. No, it's nothing. That alone made her blink slowly, like she wasn't used to being taken seriously the first time she spoke. They ran tests. Not everything all at once, not dramatically, just step by step, careful and routine. The kind of care that should have existed earlier, but didn't, because too many people had decided her pain was not urgent enough to matter. Hours passed. Outside, the town continued, as if nothing important was happening. Shops opened and closed. People argued over small things. Life moved forward, in its usual rhythm of avoidance and repetition. But inside that clinic, something else was shifting. Not loudly, not instantly, but undeniably. When the results came back, the doctor didn't waste words. "There is a physical cause," he said simply. "It explains the pain." No blame, no confusion, just fact. The girl didn't fully understand the details, but she understood tone. And for the first time, no one was trying to translate her pain into doubt. The man exhaled quietly, not in relief exactly, but in confirmation. Something real had finally been named. The family was called in. That part was harder. The aunt stood near the doorway, arms stiff, face unreadable in that way people adopt when they are trying not to feel responsible too quickly. When the doctor explained, her expression shifted. First confusion, then disbelief, then something sharper. "You're saying we didn't notice this?" she asked. The doctor remained calm. It may not have been obvious at first, but the pain was consistent enough that it should have been checked earlier. Silence followed. Not peaceful silence, heavy silence, the kind that carries too many unspoken conversations. The aunt looked at the girl for a long moment, really looked at her. And for the first time, She didn't see exaggeration. She saw absence of care, of attention, of belief. But instead of speaking, she turned away slightly. Not denial anymore. Something closer to discomfort, because acceptance would require emotion she had avoided for too long. Outside the room, the town's reaction was already forming. Some people were quiet, unsettled. Others, defensive. A few angry, not at what happened, but at the fact that it had been exposed. It wasn't that serious. She always looked fine. Why is this being made into a big issue now? But beneath those words was something deeper. Fear of responsibility. Because once something is acknowledged, it cannot be unseen again. The man didn't argue with them. He never had to. The truth had already done what arguments couldn't. It had been confirmed. And confirmation is louder than opinion. Days passed, then weeks. Treatment began. Slowly, carefully. Not a miracle. Not an instant transformation. Just gradual relief. Less tension in her movements. Fewer moments of sudden stillness. Less fear before sitting down. For the first time in a long time, her body stopped feeling like something she had to negotiate with. But healing was not just physical. It was quieter than that. It showed in small things. The way she no longer hesitated before sitting. The way her shoulders didn't tighten every time someone spoke to her. The way she started answering questions without immediately expecting dismissal. And sometimes, she even spoke first. The man didn't visit often after that. Not because he stopped caring, but because he understood something important. This wasn't his story to carry forever. He was the interruption, not the ending. Still, one afternoon he saw her again outside the clinic. She was sitting on a bench, still carefully, but this time without fear. She noticed him and paused. A moment passed between them. Then she spoke. Not quietly this time, but clearly enough for him to hear. "It doesn't hurt as much now." He nodded. "I'm glad," he said simply. No speeches, no praise, just acknowledgement. As he walked away, he noticed something different about the town. It hadn't transformed completely. Silence still existed. People still avoided uncomfortable truths. But something had cracked. A pattern had been interrupted. Because once a town learns that ignoring pain has consequences, it doesn't forget it easily. And the girl? She remained. Not as a whisper anymore, but as proof that even in places built on silence, someone choosing to listen can change everything.